Was everybody here last time? I guess you were, weren't you?
I think Olaf
I
was the
was
only
not.
one that wasn't.
Yeah, last time you talked about BD, and today you're gonna talk about AD.
Yeah, that's right. Well, no, everything is, no, I'm not gonna talk about AD. AD's got plenty of people to talk about themselves for that era. No, I retired in 97? Essentially from the hunt. As Franz is not here today. Oh, thank you very much, Sam. I found that the master left out one of the verses of the Myopia Hunt Toast. And I brought him actually it's a copy of the old man's original full-length toast, Myopia Toast, that Julia Bird used to.
Oh, good for you.
And I've got actually the letter that my stepfather left it to me in, and I've copied it. So
Oh, that's great.
I'll pass that on. So next time they don't leave a verse out. It's one of the old traditions. Okay. Got a few more things to put out here. Although I think we saw most of this last time. That's a picture of somebody you would recognize. This is what Susanna wants to see. It's a lot of, and you're all welcome to look at it, or you don't want to destroy her.
A destroyer.
Yeah. My ship in World War II. Her brother and I served in the Navy, and her father did too. My father as well. So we have a Navy tradition. Sometimes we get together to. Oh yeah, that's
Your best horse.
my best horse, whip horse, and that's a picture of jumping over the big log on Asbury Street, right near the patents, with the log is still there.
Yeah.
In a hunter trial. And that's, oh, let's see, Mandy isn't here, but anyway, that's
Quadrille.
quadrille. And this time, well, I brought this back. My biggest
Your biggest
achievement,
trophy?
my biggest achievement, well, there was another trophy in the junior jumping class years ago, but I brought these too. And I'll actually put those right here.
Perfect.
And let's see. Oh, yeah. This is a horse and a half. It's hard to see because it's such a faded photograph. It's yours truly at Alpine Farms, actually, on a horse called Safe Trip. It's a Palomino, and but boy, she could jump almost anything. And it's the only horse I had. I don't know how many times you jump an upwards jump. You know, there are a lot of down jumps, but one of the 100 trials, there was an upwards jump. You had to jump up onto a flat surface about 3 feet or 3.5 feet in front of you. A lot of horses won't do that. They'll just stop and dodge and all. This horse was able to do that. Safe Trip. She had only one fault.
She was afraid to train.
Freight train was she also had an iron mouth. You could not, every time I'd take off after hounds, I'd have to circle her to stop running. And eventually, she used to belong to Mabel Story, who is a lady of some age in some conversation. She's very talkative. And she loved the horse, but she said to somebody, I forget, one of the grooms, he said, but I can't stop the damn thing. So we bought him, and she was served very loyally for a time. And but I did have to circle her quite often in order to bring her down to a stop. Okay. So So the horse was the thing last time. This time is going to be, and feel free to Q&A anytime. Feel free to be inquisitive. This town was quite a bit different when I was growing up earlier. And let's see, we lived here, my parents and my two brothers and I were brought up here, basically in Hamilton. And as I said last week, we lived in the house on the top of the hill opposite Town Hall. And it's where the Esdales are now. And that house actually, I think, came from C.G. Royce's family. Apparently it was built for a member of the family as a wedding present up there. Anyway, my parents, my father was from Beverly in Boston, my mother was from the Berkshires, and they got married in 1931, and they settled up there on that hill. There wasn't a lot of land, around 30 acres or so, but as I said last week, we had our own stable at the bottom of the roadway there. A fearsome, I always remember it because it's even worse than the driveway I have now. It was almost a quarter of a mile long and went way up to the top of the hill by the side of Cutler Pond and then circled around in front. And you had a view to the west towards what we call Bradford's Hill, and that was the Church of Bradford's place. And it was very communal. It was very sort of country type. And I always wondered why every town surrounding us here has a birth or a incorporation date of 1634, and all that kind of thing. Why is Hamilton 1785? And I only discovered that about 4 or 5, 6 years ago when I spotted a book in a bookstore about, and I opened the book just a little bit to see, and all of a sudden there was Cutler Church right in the first or second chapter. So I closed the book again, and it was a book called Pioneer, written by David McCulloch, who is one of the great historians of this time. He's written lots of books about the Suez Canal, the passing between the seas, and other books. And so I read that book and I found out really this town was known as Ipswich Hamlet. In other words, I always wondered if it was carved out of Wenham or Ipswich, and the answer is it was carved out of Ipswich. And that's why in 1785 or whenever it was, because of Alexander Hamilton, it was named after one of the founding parties. And this has nothing to do with my piano, but the Cutler Church had a pastor named, his first name I forget, is somebody Cutler, came from Yale, Episcopal minister, the school you go to for ministers. I guess a lot of the colleges, including Harvard, were in those days. And anyway, he came up and took this church, and even as a kid, I spotted the sign, the tourist sign, that's on the sidewalk. If you walk from Cutler Church down to Town Hall on the west side of the road, you see this big tourist sign. It was put up in the 1930s. From this spot, on December, I think, 19th, 1785, the Congregational Church of Cutler, the wagon, and it was a real wagon, left for the Great Western Reserve. And I'm saying to myself, why the heck did they ever figure to pick the winter in December to take a trip which takes them over the White Mountains into the Ohio Valley? Well, long and short, those people went back and forth, and they established what is today the city of Marietta, Ohio, on the Ipswich River. And it's known as, he was a rabid abolitionist at the time. And of course, there was, I'm told, and this is McCulloch talking now, not me, I didn't research this, but the Missouri Compromise which one we were adding states to the west of the Rockies, etc. And there was this old tension between the South and the North. And when you brought in a new state on the North, which is a free state, you had to bring in a new state on the South, which was a slave state, permitted slavery. And Maine, in 1820, Maine was admitted it used to be part of Massachusetts, and it was admitted to the Union as its own state. And I think it was Missouri came in as a slave state. And had it not been for Cutler, that old compromise would probably not have worked, and there'd be more slave states in the North, or there would have been over that time. So that's one case where that particular church sort of had a significant impact on American social policy. But anyway, that aside, let's see, there was a ski hill here actually on Bridge Street. I think I told you that last week. Anyway, that hill was covered with, it was open, the trees were gone, and the first roadkill that I ever went on was up that hill. And the trees have all grown back, so you'd never know that now. But that was even before the Clark's place, Brackenside, and the Hamilton Hill over there on Moulton Street. But that was the first ski hill in Hamilton. And the post office was Daly's Market. That was where we got our groceries. It was the first time I was ever shut off on credit, because Hap Daly, who ran the store, was a very nice guy and all that, and I'd always walk down the hill and maybe order a Pepsi-Cola or something like that, and something from the store. And he always got a pencil and paper and wrote it down the bill. One day I went down there, and all of a sudden Mr. Daly said, I said, Mr. Daly, could I have a whatever? And he said, I'm very sorry, Nat, but nope, you can't. And I said, why? Well, your mother has said that maybe you're doing too much of this. And so I took it and I complained to my mother, but she was probably right. But anyway, she was probably afraid of too much soda on the teeth or something of that kind. And we had a pony and a horse and two ponies from time to time, and I think we went through that last week, so I won't repeat that. And the life was simple. My father had a card on the back of his kitchen door, and it was a whole list of numbers written on the back, 2-1 or 1-3 or then whatever. That was the code for the Hamilton Firehouse. And the fire department in those days was, if you get on Main Street, Bay Road, if you go down Bay Road to the village, you turn right on Railroad Avenue, and you drive up past all the stores there. And Rexall Drugs is still there. We had the comics book store, the paper store, and then we had First National, and then we had Mr. Cole, who was a German tailor, a tiny little man who made good suits. Chittick's, of course, where we got our horse supplies. You take the next left, and that was where the fire department was. And we could hear that from our house on the hill there. So what would happen was my father would listen. He had the code. He could tell from whether it was blunt, one bleat and then two, or two bleats and then one, or three bleats and none, and whatever. That was the code for where the fire was. And, you know, if it blew in the right place, Bradford's Field over there by Cutler Road, Farms Road, we knew it then. There was a field just on the west side there, opposite the Bradford Woods. That caught on fire every year, because in August the grass was dry, and of course we had what? Steam trains. And those engines would come down there, the one that sent my pony in a panic every time she saw one. they would get on fire. And my father would recognize that code, and he'd come to us and say, okay, children, let's, my mother too, Vicky, you know, let's get all our rakes and our pails and all that kind of thing, and let's go. And so we would go out and help the fire department, which was volunteer at the time, fight the fire almost every year or two on that stretch of grass near the railroad. And then we'd all sit down and have maybe a couple of barbecues or something like that, and have a little party. So this is the community kind of feeling that you had about this town way back then. And the other thing I remember is telephones. You know what my telephone number was? 8. That was it. It was the old-fashioned telephone. This was even before dial tones. The old-fashioned telephone where you lift up the handle. Operator, and of course the operator's right down the Railroad Avenue. 4-2, please. That was myopia. My first cousin was 3 and 1, and it was just, you know, it was that kind of community. But the reason I tell you all that is so I can tell you this. The families that were here before we got here all had wonderful estates. And Bradley Palmer Park was one of them. Appleton Farms was another. The Winthrop's Groton House, of course. Harrigan's Liquor Store on 1A had no houses at all, that big field. The place where Route 62 and in Wenham and, what's the name of that other street? Anyway, it's where there's 4 streets intersecting and across. And that was known as 4 Corners, and we would sometimes meet in that field because there were no other houses there. And Nancy's Corner, of course, I told you about last week. It was this that really ensured that the Mapihan survived during World War II. And as I think I pointed out, it was the ladies essentially that were responsible for that. And you think of Anna Prince, who the Prince family was going. My mother told me this story about when December 7th, 1941, my father was playing with Mr. Clark and Mr. Bradford and a whole bunch of other of his friends, Johnny Lawrence perhaps, and they were all in the pasture at the foot of what was in our house, right across from Hamilton Hall, when all of a sudden, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the siren in the hall went off. And we're saying, what? What's that about? It's not a fire, because the firehouse horn is not bleeding. This was a Sunday, I think, too. And this was pre-television, we all went up to the house on top of the hill where we lived to find out what was going on. Pearl Harbor. And, that happened at 7 o'clock local time in the middle of the Pacific. It was 2 o'clock our time here. After that, so many people of the men took off. My father, Susanna's father, the Clarks, others took off, and they all signed up, obviously, to go to war. And they were coming and going and this and there. Both Susanna's father and my own, and you're already aware that our 2 families are very close, fought in the Navy. And I had my own contribution to that here. But anyway, he was on aircraft carriers and was sunk once actually, but survived. And your father, I think, was on destroyers, wasn't
No, he was on.
Oh, you was on cars as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe they were in the same unit, I don't know. Could be, it was the Quonset Point down in Rhode Island that they all went to learn
Right.
about this.
Yeah.
And so it was the ladies who essentially kept the hunt going and the landowners. Now, obviously, when they came back, we started having a pretty good time again. And my first trophy there was about in 1945. And of course, I was in the Hamilton show. And for that, all I had to do was sit on a horse and look nice. Because it was the lead rein class. And I guess I left that one in the car, but that's okay.
No, it's right there.
Oh, it's right there. Okay.
The cup is right there.
You can take a look at it later on. And those shows kept on going. Now, it isn't easy to put those all on. And it isn't easy to maintain a hunt, a full-fledged fox hunt in an area such as ours without a considerable amount of labor. And that's not just the whips and the masters and the stable people and who take care of the hounds and the hunt committee, etc. This is commitment by the entire community. People who ride horses and maybe a lot of people who don't. And the reason all these things are organized today is because people get out there with saws and hammers and nails and all kinds of tools, tractors, and built or included jumps, and some of which were, and particularly in Bradley Palmer, were rotting and needed restoration. And somebody was silly enough to name 3 of those after yours truly, which is not a lie, but it's only one small effort. But you had to clear the trails. Yes, the hunt had some employees to help with that, but the number of runs and the number of lands that we had to maintain really requires an effort by the landowners and the people themselves. There was one run which I remember used to go from Topsfield quite in a wide swath west of Route 1 and around by what used to be the Danvers Mental Hospital, etc., and then back towards Danvers and the Great Moynham Swamp. That got cut off when I-95 came through here. So what we had to do was research into the places that it used to go. And since I lived in Boxford at that time, I was able to do that. And we marshaled together a few people and we researched the old maps. I don't know, did the maps ever come out to you?
Not yet.
Not yet. As to what the meets were in that part of the community. And we were able to get some of them back, and we have a much shorter run inside the boundaries of Route 1 and I-95, basically. But you could start, and they still run it, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Don't they? They meet at Essex Agricultural Store there, Essex Co-op, Essex County Co-op. And Russell and I used to lay a trail, which we thought looked like a fox or one thing or another, and it was an hour and a half or something like that, and it wound up pretty close to where you started, so it was circular. But we rebuilt the jumps and we cleared out the woods and we went racing through the cane potato chip people farm, and we were able to add that on to what is usually a decreasing number of runs that we have here. Virginia, of course, still is so open that you can, most of the major runs there are, although as you get closer to Washington, it is pushing everybody out a little bit. But there are there's a very lot of land open there. But if you take the time to flesh out the trails, we even had a ride in my little town of Oxford. We didn't have room enough to hunt, but I think one time we met at Windrush actually, and this was not an organized hunt with hounds, but no, we did have a couple of hounds, but not too much. But it was more of a ride than, because we had to ride through the village and all that stuff. But it traced traces of some of the older runs that they used to have in Byfield. Would they still do that? No. Todd's Farm, of course, is one of the places on Raleigh that they used to meet. And there was a run along the Merrimack River as well, which was somewhat controversial because a portion of it was guarded by one of the members of myopia that didn't get along with one of the masters, so we had to try and negotiate our way around that. And bear in mind, first of all, also, it was just Wednesdays and Saturdays for drag hunting. We fox hunted until I think I was in the Navy at the time and they switched over, but I think it was during the Vietnam War, it was the 60s, that they finally gave up fox hunting and decided to concentrate on dragging. And as it started out, it was okay, but it was a little bit different because Chuck Haley, who had helped with the kennels and all that, and he helped with some of the repair and the countryside. And he had one horse called Headlight, I remember, and his idea of laying the drag was you just get out and in Bradley Palmer or something like that, and put a stinky piece of fabric on the end of a long rope and just drag it behind the horse. Well, foxes don't run that way. As you know, they run sometimes up trees, and although these foxes don't, the gray foxes tend to climb trees. And we had a real controversy one time when Russell and I were hunting in Virginia about one of the hunts down there that literally started chopping down a tree to get the fox to come out of it. And that's not good policy, not fair. Anywho, but Russell and myself particularly, used to try and either find somebody and teach them the art of being a fox and doing circles around trees perhaps, or running for water. Part of our problem with fox hunting here is the hounds would take off after fox because they often go to water. We have a lot of marshes here with Mouse River and all that. And we'd come back with maybe, or they'd come back with, this was before I started whipping in. I never whipped in for a fox hunt. But anyhow, at least here, I helped out down in Virginia sometimes, but not here. But anyway, the fox runs to water and all of a sudden you come back and you have only 2 or 3 couple left and all the rest have gone and chase the fox wherever it takes them. And we used to get calls from people in southern New Hampshire and say, hey, I got this funny looking dog here. And it's got a tag on it and it says, call Hamilton 4-2. That was obviously an errant hound who kept on hunting all the way to, maybe the Merrimack River or something, I don't know. We used to get calls and Chuck would have to go pick them up. And sometimes a pretty good distance from the kennel. So that's, I'm pretty sure one of the reasons they gave up fox hunting and went for drag. But we tried to make a real drag and imitate what a fox might do. with one sole exception, and that is if it went, we never tried to imitate a go to ground and shovel one out. I never saw that here when I was fox hunting, but I did see it in Virginia. And they had gray fox. Those gray foxes down there. They would go to ground too. And sometimes you see some poor guy trying to dig them out. I didn't think that was fair, but anyway, that's what they did, and that's what you did when you were there. It was an education, obviously, for yours truly. We weren't really horse people when we moved here. And my mother knew how to ride, as I think I told you, because she came from the Berkshires. My father was allergic to horses, so he didn't go anywhere near them unless he had to. And, ooh. Oh, okay, I'm standing halfway on the fireplace. What else can I tell you about this? It's really a commitment by the people who know the land, and we always say the land is so crucial, which it is. And I was always impressed by people in Virginia, and particularly in Ireland, too, how well they knew the country. Oh yes, we'll probably be running a fox over near Donnybrook or someplace today, and by golly, that's more often than not, that's what happened. And when the only relief that drag hunting gave, particularly the people who are supporters who drive the bands and the horses and all that, are you know where you're going to end. And as such, you don't have to guess. Because in Virginia, where you're fox hunting, you know, you're out there, and all of a sudden you get a line on a fox, and tally-ho, and then you're off, and you don't know where you're going to end up at the end of the hunt. And very often, you may not be anywhere near your van. There were no such thing as cell phones in those days, so you had to find a place to call up or whatever, say, hey Mike, come over to, you know, Four Corners or something. We ended up over here instead of wherever we were going. And they'd have to come over and pick you up there. So it took the guesswork out of a fox hunt, but you know, it was kind of fun to be there. And the guesswork was kind of fun too. There's one story I forgot to tell last week, but I think everybody was here when I told it. I bring you up to date on the what I call the not Old Dominion. It's a paper kind of hunt with horses and teams finding clues and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You heard that. Okay.
Yeah, we even got it. We got it on video.
Oh, you have a video.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna try to recreate it.
Are you going to try and recreate it? Well, that'll be fun. Yeah, and even so, in my day in drag hunting, at least BD, we had a lot of events. We did have flat races on the territory. We had to keep up pounders to make that work. We had a lot of annual competitions in the Masters Cup and all that, and that was taken very seriously then, even so, although Donald made an art out of it almost. And what else did we do? Gymkhanas occasionally in spots. Everybody knows what I mean by a gymkhana. It's sort of the kids running through barrels and opening gates and gymnastic type of thing to prove your ability to not only ride but deal with the countrysides, the challenges the countryside would bring in. And we had a picnic once over the Ipswich River. This was not a hunt event, but it was a hunt recreational celebration, if you will. And we all, you know, had picnics, etc., with the parents and children. and one of the party with a well-known family, and he was in the teens at the time, I'm pretty sure, made a slight error. And that is, he got a long lead line, he was tying his horse to a tree so that the horse would, stay and be there for him after the picnic. And he made a mistake because he did not look up in the tree to see if there was anything up there. Lo and behold, he got, ow, and then, oh, ow, and then discovered that he was being attacked by a swarm of hornets who didn't like the fact that their tree was being used as a parking space. And the old saying about hornets, the best way to deal with hornets is not to put a spoke in the nest. And anyway, he all of a sudden got tangled up in his lead line. The horse was going around in circles, and he was being pinned to the tree by the lead line. You know who this is, I think. You don't, I'll tell you later. And anyway, and he was saying, "Oh, God damn it!" No, excuse me. Delete, I guess. Get those bees out of here, or whatever. And finally, after I forgot how we did it. Actually, I think maybe we even cut the lead line, and the horse was able to. We cut not all of it, obviously, but enough to free the horse from the torment. And then, of course, somebody had to go unwind the victim of this particular thing, and that was at least a scene I will never forget. But it's a kind of country thing that we all take a great delight in risking, and it's all very together. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if AD was large and colorful and beautiful and all that, BD was, I think, for me personally, more interesting, but still pretty nice because of the community feeling that we had for the country, and these other little events, which, unimportant as they may seem, before the tents arrived in AD and all that, unimportant as they seemed at the time, they were really community building, and it was very satisfaction. I take more satisfaction. I'd retired before Donald became master, and everybody knows, I think, I was put the pressure from a lot of people to succeed Russell as master, and I had to tell him I just could not do it because I was working full time, and it was my horses. I was spoiled too during that time, and that my parents kept the horses always. My stepfather and my mother loved to ride, and they wanted to see me and my brother Laurie actually as well hunt. Laurie moved to Boston, and he sort of gave it up and kept on with it, and had a very good time with it. But it's a great opportunity, and I got a chance to hunt a lot of other different places too. And so, in a way, I have thanks to all of you people who have all the land, and all of those other people who kept the hunt going through the war, so I could spend 50 years, or 52 years actually, doing that kind of thing. 25 of those years whipping in for Neil and Russell, and I guess those are the two primarily. So, have I left anything out?
Well, what I was always interested in how you got involved with the hold hard.
Oh, well, that's...
You would leap out of some pasture somewhere or some bunch of trees and screech, hold hard, and you had to stop immediately. What was that part of the hunter trials, or what was that?
Yes. This is one of my two horns. And I won't blow it now. I tooted it at the Blessing of the Hounds this year, and all of a sudden Susanna said, "God damn it, shut up!" So,
Nice.
and you don't do that. And I had to apologize to Sam as well. I hadn't really met her then, but she was very carefully and nonplussed and went out. Yeah. The conventions of language. Oh, I should maybe tell you a little bit about this. But anyway, we'll start with the hold hard. There are certain things you have to know. First thing, if someone comes riding at you full brown and they've got a whip's cap on, the first thing you have to do is turn around and say, "Where whip?" which means beware a whip, because the whipper in has the right of way, because obviously he or she is chasing hounds. Okay. And the other is, if anybody, a whip or a master, or a field master particularly, I never had to be field master, thank God. That's something I enjoyed, I avoided. Anyhow, he puts his hand up and says, "Hold hard," and you usually will, blow on the horn. I don't have a lip for it anymore, so I can't do it very well. And you have to stop immediately, because there is something dangerous ahead, maybe a ditch that's dangerous to cross or whatever. But if you have to stop immediately, just hold hard. And then there's "where hole," and a hole is a hole in the field or something that you're running across, and you don't want your horse to step in it. Okay, and there are a lot of those around here. You have a lot of groundhogs, woodchucks we call them, who live in the ground, and when you hay in the summertime, the holes are still there. And in the fall, when you're riding across hay fields, and the hay has been taken off, there's a serious a danger that your horse could, while galloping particularly, not see a hole and step in it. And that causes real problems. In fact, this is not really fox hunting, but when we lived, my father died in 1950. My mother remarried a widower whose first wife died in Hamilton in 1947. And my mother got remarried a year later to a man who was the president of Myopia. And he'd been 4 years with 3 sons, and my mother had been 1 year with 3 sons, and so we moved to Topsfield out of Hamilton in 1951. Over there, they had a wonderful house built by Hamrod, one of the better known architects in Myopia, right on the Ipswich River, and its meeting nome was Windy River. And not only then, we had about 20 head of white-faced Hereford cattle. So we had a farm over there in Topsfield on Esbury Street. If you go by General Patton's place and up over the hill, we were right on the left side there, right opposite the western entrance to Bradley Palmer. Perfect for riding. We could ride in Bradley Palmer, we could ride at the old Bradstreet Farm, now the Audubon, across the river. It was a great place to be. And I spent a lot of summers driving tractors to mow and windrow the hay. I don't know if windrows exist anymore, and bale it, not only for the cattle, but for the horses, and for certain other farms around here, like the Pattons. And we also mowed the Moon. You all know where the Moon is. It's in Bradley Palmer. It's the hill that's entirely open on top, and that you can see the ocean, or you used to be able to see the ocean from there, etc. And one of my summer jobs was, if the cattle weren't in a certain pasture, I'd get a pickup truck, a chair, a water cooler, a carton of soft drinks or apple juice or something, and a .22 rifle. And my job was to sit in a chair reading the comics and crunching on lunch or whatever towards late afternoon. And if I saw a woodchuck pop out of a field, bam,
Oh, good. Coolidge.
he was done, or she. Most of the time anyway. And of course they all have back doors as well as front doors, and you have to make sure that you fill that in as well. So that was one of our, I'm not asking any of you to do that, but that was one of our crazy hunt related chores for the summertime, to make sure we filled in as many as the woodchuck holes as we could. But they, they never were endangered, let's put it that way. Okay. Did I touch every?
You fulfilled the mission.
Say again?
You fulfilled your mission.
I fulfilled my mission.
Yeah.
So,
It's fun to hear about
you
those
guys,
things.
Q&A if you want. I'll tell you what I know or make up what I don't know. It was fun. I enjoyed it very much. I was very lucky to do it. And don't know too many people outside this area who have that privilege. And most of the masters, statistic for you to think about. The 3 ladies that I know who actually did or come within 2 months of living to 100 are, anybody want to guess? Mrs. Winthrop, Angela Winthrop, Janice Snow,
Yes, that's right.
Don Little's mother, and who was the third one? Barbara Sears.
Yes, you're right. Wow.
All horse people.
All those people.
And Anna Prince was, I don't know, she was 80, well under, I think she was over 90 when she finally passed away. And she wrote Side Saddle.
Yeah.
I don't know how she did that, but she did. And so you can argue that not only did they have a lot to do with saving the hunt through the war years, but they lived a long time as a part of that.
Yeah.
And
You said Mrs. Appleton lived a long time as well.
yes, she did, but well, there was more than one Mrs. Appleton. The one I knew was Joan, and she was a lovely person, one thing or other. She wasn't really that interested in the hunt. And we used to see the Colonel come out, and Bradley Palmer every now and again, wearing his full khaki with a leather belt uniform as a member of what used to be the U.S. Horse Brigades. And I didn't know him very well. I've only met him a couple of times. He was kind of stuffy, yeah, one thing or another. The problem was there, that farm, of course, is the earliest working farm, and the only still working farm, one of the few, I guess. Somebody in New Hampshire or Maine will probably quarrel with me. It was the only working farm, or longest working farm in the country, having been purchased by the Appletons from I don't know what a deed or whatever it is in colonial days, by King Charles the First, and it's been in that family ever since. And the rumor has it that the two little lots that Joan sold, two small lots on Farms Road, or now Cutler Road, what we call the rolling coasters up and down the hill there, to outside people, because she was afraid that they were running out of money. I think
Yeah,
they were.
that's
Is
right.
that the story?
Yeah.
They did have cattle there for many, many years, and the hunt always had to get permission to go through on Thanksgiving or whatever it was, and sometimes that didn't happen because Joan, felt that it was not appropriate. So we had to respect that. But more times than not, we did go through there. But that is intact. Bradley Palmer's, of course, has a deed of some kind that we're allowed to go through there and maintain property there. Oh, here's another thing which many of you don't know. The railroad. I forget when it was that the railroad came through. I wasn't born, I don't think, at the time. Because when I grew up, the shopping center in the Hamilton today wasn't there, obviously. That was a railroad siding with the branch of the Essex Railroad, Essex branch of the railroad, which used to go from Hamilton all the way to Essex. And there was still some rails there, and I told you last time about the story that everybody used to put together a train and go hunt up in New Hampshire. When I was growing up, the rails had been already removed from that line. They closed it down, presumably as scrap for the war. But in the days when they were laying the railroad long ago, and Hamilton was on the main line, 2 tracks from Boston to Portland, Boston, Maine. Colonel Appleton had to negotiate to the railroad for a stop in Appleton Farms, a railroad stop between Hamilton and Ipswich, and he got it. Never built anything there, and I didn't even know about this until the trustees of reservations, I think it was, yes, held a big celebration at Appleton Farms, okay? And as part of that, somebody knew that the Appleton family had the rights to have a train stop on their property. And they pulled together, how many years ago was this, Susanna?
Not long ago, I mean, I don't know.
No, the celebration,
Party,
the party,
yeah, it was about
10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah.
or roughly. Okay, somebody got a hold of some Pullman cars somewhere, and they borrowed an engine, obviously not a steam engine, and they brought one of the benefits, if you gave a certain extraordinary amount of money, was to get on the train in Boston. This is Sunday, I'm pretty sure, when the railroad wasn't really doing much, and come on out in those cars and stop at Appleton Farms and get out and go to the party.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful, because I remember some of those cars were the old sleeper cars, I used to take. My parents took a train once. We took the Owl, which was the regular 11 o'clock train from Boston to New York, when I was at school, elementary school. We took the Owl to New York City, and then we took something called the Silver Meteor, which was an Eastern Railroad, the Seaboard Coastline, and you had sleeper cars and all that kind of thing. And we took that down to Florida to visit my grandmother. And I think they had one of those cars as one of the cars that came out 10 years ago. It was just great to see it, you know.
I hate that train.
Today.
I remember when it went in, it was so.
Oh, you hated that
peaceful
train, yeah.
And everything, that stupid train right through the middle of the farm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I also took that train from Washington D.C. to
Oh, did
visit
you?
my grandmother in Florida.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Seaboard coastline, right. And, all right.
Thank you, Coolidge.
Well, you're entirely welcome. Now, another reason I'm over here is Susanna missed the pictures last time, so
I wanna go look at them because I used to ride some of those horses.
we traded horses every once in a while.
Yeah,
You probably heard about her father's wild horse called Smitty.
oh my God.
And Smitty actually, that was Michael's
It was
horse.
like, yes.
That was Mike's horse, it wasn't ours. Michael Halloran was the groom who took care of our horses and took care of the place we lived back there. And when we moved to Topsfield, he moved over to Asbury Street opposite the bull barn into a small house, and he had his own little stable in back of that, and he had a couple of horses, which he and his daughter Philomena used to ride themselves, you know, around. But also, another thing I didn't say last time, the Groton horse show, where I finally gave up. The people were at that show, obviously, well, my parents weren't there, and it was Michael Halloran, and I think Mary was there too, and Chief Ed Frederick from the Hamilton Police Force. I don't know if Bobby Poole was there too or not. But I mentioned the fact that Ed Frederick was, fortunately his wife was in the hunt, and so he always, I won't say he gave us any obvious advantage, but he always respected the hunt. And when my brother and I went to that show, and we had the only 2 clean runs in a show in the junior jumping class of, I don't know, 13, 14 people. And most of the judging was done on performance rather than way of going or conformation or something. And we didn't get one of the top 2 ribbons. We didn't get any ribbons. So that's the only time I saw Ed Frederick get mad. He took his hat off and whanged it to the ground and yelled something to the judge that I don't remember, but it was loud and it got everybody's attention. So that's when I went to my mother and said, I'm not doing this anymore. It can be rigged.
I'm glad you brought up Smitty. That's very nice of you to do that. He was a very funny horse. When we got him, I don't know what had been done with him at all, but my father just decided he was going to start riding again. And he was, I don't know, in his 70s or something. And he'd always ridden a thoroughbred, and this thing was a little tough quarter horse. And when we brought him into the barn to get his shoes on, I think he sort of stood with his ankles together.
Oh, was that right?
And the blacksmith, I can't remember who it was, said, I hope you didn't pay anything for this thing. He'd take him we had this little mounting block very low to the ground, and Daddy would fling himself onto that horse, and they would be in a flat-out gallop at the top of the hill. I mean, there goes Smitty.
Oh, absolutely.
Hang on, Daddy.
Yeah, they went up the moon, and they
lapping the moon.
Yeah.
And driving everybody who was unfortunately on the moon.
Well, I still remember the day that I think you were with us when we were riding one thing, and all of a sudden with this crackling through the trees. Your father and Smitty just came roaring out of the trees in a flail of leaves and sticks and everything else that he was fighting.
The reins on my horse and said, "It's Johnny Lawrence. Stay away from him."
See, we had a lot of fun, BD.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Lots of
But
stories.
anyway, Well, all right. Let's put it this way. It's March 8th, right? We have a joint, well, it's not really joint. Mandy Hogan from Windrush is going to be here with her, I don't know, Betsy or whoever's coming from there. Yours truly will be here too, because they want me here for some reason. But she's going to run the show, as far as I know, right?
And then
So-
next week we have Lois Cheston.
And we have Lois. Now there, if you have questions about anything with wheels,
Yeah,
ask Lois.
yeah. I thought
Because
you should
Lois
talk about
and
those.
Lutz Wallum and Roger Sagamore Street, English lady. I'm terrible on names now. Lovely English lady. And of course Lois and Charlie. And there are a few other people who are really taken in by that whole wagon kind of society. And it's not just here, it's Philadelphia and Virginia. I don't know about New York. I don't know if there's any place in New York State that has it. But it's it was for a time, pretty hot thing to do.
Yeah,
And again, it takes a lot of work. You got to set up obstacles for them to drive around so that, all their skills, driving skills are displayed. And as such, obviously, some of these wagons are, some of them pretty old and absolutely lovely. And if they need any sprucing up, they get spruced up. And there were small carts as well, two-wheel carts. We had one of those actually in Hamilton when we were here. And that you could take around the countryside. But it was a full week of events. It was probably the hunt equivalent of, I forgot to tell you about Neil's events, Ledyard's, where the professionals. We had a lot of those at BD actually. And Neil Lear decided he wanted to hold an event with his military training. He called everybody out, and we built fences, and we built rings, outdoor rings, and we put together jumps. And it was 3 days. It was cross country the first day, dressage the second day, and then stadium jumping the third day. And that started with Neil. So I can't say it's all Don's doing. And, we had stopwatches and all that kind of thing. It's the only time I've had a horse drop dead right in front of me, actually. Was I was doing a mounted patrol. We had to get in our suits and get on horseback and keep the control away, safe distance from the course, particularly with the cross country. And they had pretty strict rules about checks and all that kind of thing. But one time this horse came laboring up the hill and was about to go around the corner at the top of the hill over there at Ledyard actually. And all of a sudden it just crumped and collapsed. And the horses, as I said last week, are too important to do that as far as I'm concerned.
that's right.
Do you remember the Rowley Run?
I do. Todd's
I was-
Farm.
It used to come through my property
Oh,
there.
is that right?
And I was riding one of my horses on that hunt one time when he died.
When he died? Oh
Yeah.
dear.
Yeah.
Well, actually, now that I think of it, my step brother, Gil Stewart's Jr., who was a great big man, 6'2" at least, and generous of girth, shall we say, and very strong. And he was riding one of his father's elderly horses called Calliope. And I don't know where the name came from, whether she sounded like a calliope when she whinnied or not. But we were riding on the Pingree track, actually, with Mike, and all of a sudden Calliope collapsed right there. And they had to come and take him away too.
This is a little grim.
Say again?
It's getting a little grim.
Yeah, I won't tell you about the terrible fire in
Okay.
the Reynolds place in Reynolds, but that was even worse. Yeah, those things happen, unfortunately. Okay, that's all I've got today.
Thank you
That's
It's
very
such a
much.
nice afternoon.
Thank you, I'm gonna come look at those pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.